All right, so this video is going to be about programming for the Unreal Engine, specifically programming for C++. So blueprints are what we've used already. They're a node-based visual programming language created for Unreal Engine, where you have different functions and different components that you string together in order to create a flowchart of sorts, in order to have behavior in your game. Thing is, Unreal can use C++ as well as Blueprint. Right? Things with C++ is that it can be more concise. You can generally get things done a little bit quicker. It's also the industry standard language, as in you learn it and it will work outside of Unreal Engine. It just is not just specifically for one game engine. You learn C++ for this, you learn C++ for any C++ project. It also runs faster. C++ code gets run faster because it is base level. It's a lot lower level language. You get access to all of Unreal's functionality, not just some of it. And it's also good for bigger projects. Meanwhile, Blueprint is built for Unreal. It only works in Unreal though, but it's built for it, as in anything that is in a Blueprint is going to work. There are some things that you can do in C++ that do not work in Unreal. But Blueprint doesn't have that problem. However, if you learn it, it only will work in Unreal Engine. It can be a lot quicker to make changes in Blueprint. You're not just stuck, you don't have to recompile everything. You can just reconnect a node. And it makes it very beginner friendly. You make a mistake, it's easy enough to fix. You also don't have to worry about, oh, did I put the semicolon in the right place? Or is the order right? Oh, the curly brace is the wrong place, that kind of thing. It just works. It's also pretty easy to discover new functionality because you can just search in the editor what you want it to do. This makes it designer and artist friendly, as in you don't have to know all the ins and outs of programming in order to be able to use it for some basic things. But you don't get access to everything that Unreal can do. There's some things that you just simply can't do in Blueprint. You have to do it in C++. There are extensions and different things you can add on to make it, to give you more functionality, but even then, you still don't get full control. But here's the thing. You don't have to choose. C++ and Blueprint should work together. You can write your C++ that can be edited and worked in with Blueprint. The two things should be used together. In fact, very rarely will you only ever just use only C++. There'll be some Blueprint functionality that you use as part of that, and vice versa. There's some Blueprint functionality that it's just easier to do in C++. So you use the two of them together in order to get what you want. It's been a minute since we've talked about C++, so let's review some of the basic concepts and then also the kind of the rules for working with C++. So if you remember, the point of using C++ is that it's fast. Games need to handle a lot of calculations just to make something show up on screen, much less like move. And it has to do it 60 plus times per second. So your programming language has to be fast as possible. It's kind of like strapping a lawn chair to a rocket. It's very bare bones, but it goes lightning fast. And you kind of have to just hold on, right? Building a rocket out of a lawn chair. But it's fast, that's the whole point. First, you start with your editor. This is where you actually write your code. So you write your code inside of an editor, and your source code is what you're actually writing. And then that gets processed by a compiler. Your compiler then takes that and puts your code into machine language, which then gives it to a linker to link all the different parts together. And finally, you end up with a executable file at the end. And this process is fairly complicated. However, lucky for us, you don't have to do all that much. So in a compiled language, your code is converted directly into machine code, which the processor can then execute. So you write your code and then puts it into machine code. This results in a faster and more efficient code that can be executed multiple times. The alternative is an interpreted language, which is processed every time you run the program, and that can be a lot slower. However, compiled programs can only run on computers with the same architecture as the computer they were compiled on. By that, I mean you can only run your program on the same kind of computer. You compile it on a Windows machine, it will only run on a Windows machine. Now, the first step in this chain is the editor. We're going to be using Visual Studio as our editor. This is where we're actually going to be writing our code. You write the source code in the programming language C++. Your compiler takes that and does other things with it. But we're writing in this programming language inside of Visual Studio. Even when we use Unreal Engine, Unreal Engine's actually using a backbone of Visual Studio. So your compiler takes the source code and then it will compile it, which that means it takes your code and transforms it into executable machine code files. Does some optimization, some arrangements, and takes your code and puts it into something that your computer can actually understand. It then has a linker in the executable. So the compiler will only compile the exact code you give it. Most of the time, you will find references to other files, other libraries, other functions. The linker will link everything together, which then produces finally your executable file, the thing that you can click on to open. Now, this is a lot of steps. And you might be worried, we get to learn how to do all of these things? Oh no, that sounds terrible. Don't worry, our IDE has this all built in. Visual Studio handles it all for us, right? All we do is have to have it set up properly. And then we want to run our code, we just build it, that's compiling it, and then linking it and all that other stuff. This will create the extra files needed each time. When you compile, it creates your executable file at the end of it. Now, when using C++ with Unreal, the Unreal Engine is built using C++. When we create a project in Unreal, you are essentially making a copy of the game engine source code. Your C++ projects need to be compiled and then launched from within that IDE. So when you're working with a C++ project, you actually don't open Unreal through the Epic Game Store anymore. You have to open it through Visual Studio and launch it and compile it from there. Or you can find the uProject file and launch it from there, but it's harder. The other thing is, whenever you make an edit in a C++ script, you need to compile the whole project over again, and that can take a while. It can be pretty slow. There's different ways of making that process faster, and unfortunately, they don't always work out the best, so you're probably better compiling each time. But we'll go over what those steps are later once we actually get back into Unreal Engine. But for now, we really just have to worry about some basic C++ concepts.